Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow. This is a show generally about bicycling and specifically about bicycle safety. I hope that Psychology Today kind of broadens your scope about bicycling and makes you more mindful of safety. Our show celebrates some of the members of our community and shares a snapshot of the many and varied, hardworking and passionate folks who make our little world a better place. Our producer, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, is an organization that promotes safety and harmony between cyclists and works to strengthen our community and your families through cycling-related programs and events. And we're celebrating a successful 2019. We placed hundreds of helmets free of charge on little heads that needed protection. I want to give our crew in the control booth a quick thank you. Without them, there would be no show. We need their expertise. So our guests on this show are passionate about cycling, but they have a focus really on young cyclists. And we're going to learn about Ed Fischer and Robert Ping's visions and their efforts to achieve those visions. So let's meet our guests. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on Psychology Today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in the Northwest and that kind of thing. So Robert, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. Great to be here. So I am one of those secret California transplants, I have to admit. Came up 16 years ago following a program called Safe Routes to School. So I'd been doing this program before. I was on the advisory board for a new national program that was getting started from colleagues of mine down the Bay Area. And the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, now the Street Trust, was offering up a position. No funding yet, so I had to come up with my own funding for it. But that got me up here. And we'd been wanting to come to Portland for a while. So we moved up and I started that work. And I've been doing kid-oriented bike programs and policy and program work ever since.
Okay, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And how about you, Ed?
Well, full disclosure, I'm also a California transplant. I've been transplanted a little bit longer than Robert, though. I've been 20 years removed. And I came up here I live in Camas 12 years ago. And I came up here for just basically a relocation of my old career, and it wasn't working out. So I left, and my wife convinced me that we needed to open a bike shop, or I convinced her. I can't remember which one it was, but we decided to open and start our own bike shop in Camas. And one of the things that early on I realized was I wanted to get involved with embracing youth. I didn't see enough kids riding bikes. I don't see enough even millennials riding bikes, so I wanted to get youth involved. So my calling was, I saw this National Interscholastic Cycling Association, which is called NICA, was introducing themselves in my state. And so I decided I wanted to help form a team and put together high school students to engage in this league, which was cross-country mountain biking racing, but also about stewardship and advocacy and just character and things. So it wasn't just solely about racing, but about getting kids an outlet besides maybe traditional sports and things to keep them active away from our screens, which seem to be dominating these days.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah.
It's getting worse. So question for each of you again, how did you each get into cycling yourself? Go ahead.
Cycling is really my personal origin story, and it starts when I was 8 years old and just moved back from Europe where I'd lived and seen lots of cycling over there. Lived in a small town in Colorado, and my parents got me a bike. Didn't tell me how to ride it, put me on it on a gravel road, and my dad pushed me. And about a half a mile later, I realized I have to figure out how to stop this thing, so I just fell over, but I was hooked at that point. So ever since, then moved to North Carolina when I was 17, and a city of about 200,000 people, Wilmington, North Carolina, in the Cape Fear region. And I was trying to get to high school and struggling because the roads there are all 6-lane, 8-lane arterials. They boast about not having freeways in town because all the streets are basically freeways in that town. Moved to Raleigh, North Carolina for my senior year of high school, and the same thing, if not worse, more traffic. I'm struggling to get to school, but by then I'm a bike racer, a road racer, and so I'm completely infatuated with the bicycle for various things. I was riding it around town. I didn't have a vehicle, didn't have any desire for a car. I raced, I rode, I commuted, I did everything on a bike, BMX jumping in the woods and the whole thing. And I started realizing policy is important because the streets were really bad. And so how do we change that? So I started writing letters to the editor and meeting local advocates. And so,
Wow.
14, 15, I started really seeing the issue. In 17, I'm starting to be active at it. And, I realized that ultimately, if you want to get more people riding in general, you want to get society to be more friendly to people outside in general, you got to start with the kids. And so once I had kids too and started thinking about having kids, I realized how important that would be. So if we want to grow bicycling, which we've been doing in little incremental ways since at least the 70s when the real bike advocacy movement started in earnest, if we want to make bigger change, we have to get the next generation to buy in. And right now we're doing incremental change and working on the middle-agers who are already riding, but we're not increasing the numbers in doing that. So by starting with the kids, we can get a new generation to be inspired by the bike, understand its value, want to be on a bike, or at least respect people that are out doing the riding and go from there. So that's been the focus of my work ever since.
Okay. Ed, how about you? How'd you initially get into biking?
Well, I was pretty passive. Most bike stories you have from bike advocates like us goes way back. As a kid, I was probably pretty passive rider. I did have a cool little BMX bike, but I wasn't big into it. By default, my dad, who's not a cyclist at all, never was, kind of got me into it because what happened is every time my grades would go down when I was 16, 17, my grades would go down and my dad would pull the car from me. So I got myself a bike and discovered mountain biking. I lived in near the Santa Monica Mountains down in Southern California, Thousand Oaks area, and just realized that I always like to explore. I was always doing a lot of hiking and exploring the hills, and I found this a better way to do it. Like out in Tapia Park, we always like to go out and check out the old MASH sets and stuff like that. And we could get out there a lot faster and cover a lot more ground on a bike. So I just became kind of attached to the bicycle, and then realizing mountain biking was another way to get out there and enjoy your terrain. So I lived pretty close to the city, but realized I had a lot of open space, and so it was a way to just explore and get out and see more. I think than a lot of the kids from my school or that I knew, I was getting out and seeing a little bit more via the bicycle. When I moved up to the Lake Tahoe in Reno area about 20 years ago, I discovered road biking and started commuting into work and things like that, and realized that, wow, I like every discipline of biking. So I just realized that I was truly a cyclist, and then when an opportunity with my career change came along, realized, hey, wow, I can really go deep into this and own a bike shop. And get involved and even more engaged that way. So
good for you.
Just finding that there's many different ways to do it. And then, of course, what's always fun is sharing your passion with other people. And with youth is always really cool because you want them engaged with those kind of things. And then just the social element of, going out and doing a thing with like-minded folks. So, like Robert, we go ride together.
Yeah. So speaking of riding, Robert, what's your favorite ride right now?
Right now, I'd have to say it's Thrillium, which is a downhill run in southern Washington in the Cold Creek area, because I get to ride with my boys. I've got a 17 and a 13-year-old. They're both mountain bike nuts now, which is relatively new for both of them. And so as a dad, it's just phenomenal to be able to spend time with my boys out in nature, being active. We talk a lot. I get more information out of them on a bike ride than I would at home. How was school? Good. Okay, great. But on a bike ride, we talk, so it's really fun. And we experience things together, challenges and exhilaration and everything in between,
Sounds great. How about you, Ed? What's your favorite right now?
My favorite ride would be any new undiscovered or unexplored ride for me. I like seeing new things, checking out new stuff, and so I would say that anytime I get to try something new, any mountain bike trail around here is pretty awesome. Mountain biking is definitely where my passion is and where where I gravitate towards. I would say the Falls Creek, if I was to name any kind of trail, I like the Falls Creek Trail, which is up by Carson on the Washington side. But there's just so many opportunities here. And I have kids also, but they kind of tiny bit rebelled due to the fact that our lives so much revolved around bikes as my kids were growing up. But my daughter is 9, and I would say probably tied with any mountain bike ride that I could do is just riding around. So a lot of times what happens is my daughter wants to go find a playmate, and so we go by bike all around the neighborhood and scan all the different friends that she has, their residents, until we find somebody that she can hang out with. So those little rides are just a blast because she's willing to go do it and then go, hey, we don't need to drive our car to go do it. We're going to go do the neighborhoods and we'll take some paths and some trails to do so. And so that's a fun little ride that I can say is just because of that connection with your kid. So
sounds good. So you've kind of talked about the role that the bike plays in your life right now, and why do you think it's so important to you personally? I mean, why? It's a bicycle. Why is it such an integral part of your life?
It's the world's greatest invention. Not that I'm biased. I'm a bikeaholic.
Yeah, well, I think you both are. We're having a little meeting here.
Yeah, this simple little invention that can do so much. You know, for society, for people, for the world. It's just, and it's fun, and it's social, and you interact with the space you're in, the neighborhood you're in, the environment you're in. You get to hang out with people. You know, one thing you can't do in a car is when you're driving down the street is say hi to somebody you see that you know. Or you don't even see them because they're in a box. But on a bike, you see people walking and biking, and you interact with people more, and you're close to the earth, you're in the air, you're feeling the wind in the air.
The sounds, all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's
some
healthy.
of them not so great, but it's true.
Right.
And anything from you?
Well, I think it's the perfect middle ground, and you know, it's whether you're passionate about cycling, which we you know, Robert and I and folks like us, we just love to get out on our bikes. We just we know what it brings to us as far as gratification goes, and also just the physical challenges of it. Anything else like that, doing a big climb or a challenging downhill or whatever it may be, but. One of the things is the middle ground is it's much faster than walking. You cover more ground, but you get to see so much more that you would miss by driving by car.
Yeah.
So you kind of get the best of both worlds. I see so much more, like as if I was walking, but you know,
you can cover some ground.
I can cover some ground that you can't via foot, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the perfect place to be for me. So that's why I like to do it. And I may not even be in the mood for a bike ride, but instead of driving my car to the store, I sure don't want to walk 3.5 miles to the store. Where a bike ride to the store is pretty darn easy.
Yeah.
So
it is.
Yeah.
So Ed, you talked about you recently sold Camus Bike and Sport, the business that you had started.
Yes.
And so I just want to kind of pick your brain a little bit, even though you're removed from it, because to me, it's kind of interesting about what changes do you foresee for the industry coming away from it? And Robert, by all means, chime in if you're seeing things too. It just seems like a very changing industry and what people are doing. I know as a road cyclist, people seem to be backing off from road riding, maybe because of safety concerns.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think because you know, I could say based on the fact that I was on the front lines, you know, interfacing with the community, whether it was avid cyclists or novices, and I can tell you barriers for people, you know, were the risks of going out and commuting and you know, interfacing directly with cars and those challenges that we have to worry about, you know, distracted driving and all that kind of thing, and do we have the proper infrastructure to get around safely? And so those were always concerns that people had, and it made people get kind of even think more about mountain biking. But there's so many opportunities. There's just so many disciplines within biking, which is one of the things that is growing. If you're asking about the industry changing, it's the fact that there's more disciplines than ever. I kind of relate it to cars as in regards to, you know, you was just a car, a pickup truck, and an SUV. Now we have crossovers, and we have mid-size and full size, and we have mini truck and full-size truck, and we have all these different categories to suit your specific needs and lifestyle. And that's what's kind of cool that the bike has morphed into. It used to be you just go into a bike shop and it's either you get a road bike and it's a 10-speed, or you get a mountain bike and it's this. And that now you've got something that can fit your lifestyle better. And so that's appealing to people if they can discover and get basically introduced in the proper way to the right vehicle, the right tool in a bike for them. So the industry is morphed into that, and now it's a matter of, can you channel people to those discoveries in a way where everyone will get the right experience. So.
I know as a ride leader, sometimes people come to my rides because I do easy rides, and they're inexperienced cyclists. And I encourage them, just bring what you have, ride on what you have. Don't rush out and buy a new bike. Find out what you want to do, what's going to work for you. Because a lot of times people do get confused at first, and they don't know, I'll get this mountain bike because it's got these big wheels and that'll keep me steady on the road. And no, maybe they want to be road bike riders, and then they got the mountain bike, they don't have a road bike, or vice versa. So I like that do a little research. What's going to work for you? What's going to be fun for you? And like you say you've got bike crazy at your house. Maybe you end up having multiple bikes for multiple disciplines. But, kind of do some research and see what's going to be the best for you.
Yeah, you can, but you really can find that bike that really suits your lifestyle. It's kind of like your little, your other mate in life. This thing's going to be perfect for what I like to do. And if there's no one bike that can do it all. If you're really into it, like we are, and a lot of bike enthusiasts are, there's no one bike that can completely satisfy all the things you want to do at the experience you want to get out of it. But you can cut it down to, say, 2 or 3 as opposed to having 7 or 8 specialty bikes. You can. I have. As I've stepped away from the bike industry.
Stronger man than I am.
As I've stepped away from the bike industry, I do have less bikes now.
Yeah, that's
for reasons I won't get into.
Well, and talking about, so what about e-bikes? I mean, the electric assist is a big factor, at least in my road biking experience. So many more people are being able to join in on the rides because of that.
Yeah, and it's making things a little bit more inclusive. It's introducing here's how I thought of it. A lot of purists, I guess you so to say, on cyclists are naysayers and e-bikes. And what I like to say is as somebody who kind of was a little bit reluctant at first, but started introducing a few, carrying a couple in the shop, toying around with it, discovering what it could do for people with some limitations. Or just say age. Living in Camas, we have a big hill called Prune Hill.
Yes, you do.
And we're flat on the bottom down by the river, and you got to go up this hill. And a lot of older folks that were aging, getting into their early 70s or something like that, were like, I'm having a hard time pulling these 10% grades anymore. And these e-bikes were getting them back in the game. And then, like I said, somebody with, an injury or a physical limitation that they have, it levels the playing field for them. And I say, in general, if you can get more bikes on the road, that's how we get more needs taken care of for us. We'll get more bike infrastructure. We need volume. And if this gets more bikes on the road to where we need more bike infrastructure, it's a win for everybody. And so I say embrace it. Here's my favorite thing I would tell somebody who come in and say, oh, you're carrying those darn e-bikes in here. And that's cheating. That's cheating. That's not a real bike. And I look at that window and I said, is that your Suburban you just drove down to my shop in?
Exactly.
You just cheated to come down here and see me, So you got to put it all in perspective. So,
Yeah, e-bikes are the hottest ticket worldwide right now. And in the U.S., we're catching up. But Europe and China, they've been doing e-bikes for a while. It's the dominant selling vehicle. Gravel bikes are really big right now.
Yes.
So I think part of the road drop might be people switching over to gravel bikes so they can
Yeah.
get away from cars a little
Yes.
bit, get that country experience. They don't want a mountain bike necessarily
Yeah.
and do roots and rocks and all the dangerous stuff. They want to have an idyllic experience, not have to be around that many cars. So ride the rural roads and gravel roads and sort of get away from it all. And that's growing quickly too.
And like Ed was describing, that's kind of that hike. You're biking a hike kind
Right,
of thing.
exactly.
You're covering more ground. You're maybe getting a little bit higher,
Yep.
seeing more.
Well, it's all a matter of discovering what you want too, right? So, like, I want the fastest sports car on the street. I like speed. However, I also have, as I'm in my 50s now, I also need convenience, utility. I need something that's practical. And what these gravel bikes are lending themselves to is something with wider tires, capable of going more places. I call myself a guerrilla rider. When I go down the main drag, I find the side street. I'm not going to get there in record time anyways. So I find the side street to go down to that has less traffic. So like in our town, it's Lake Boulevard. There's no shoulder. You're going down the street and there's nowhere to go if somebody crowds you. Right up above it is a street I can take through residential, and it's safer. And with the wider tires, it lends itself to a little bit more stableness, a little bit more tire on the road, and it's not that much slower. So you look at a 23 millimeter tire compared to a 30 millimeter tire. If you really put this thing, in the wind tunnel and see what the drag coefficient is, it's a couple seconds on a 20, 25 mile ride. So are you looking to win races, or do you want to have a good, enjoyable experience that keeps you safe and allows you to go out and do different things? Then that's maybe kind of what you want to look at. So I think that's there's the two. You want to ask about changes in the industry too. I think the two most endangered parts of a bike are the front derailleur and a 23 millimeter tire. I think those are the two things that you won't see too much of anymore as we go forward.
Right.
So yeah.
I think, we're seeing that a little bit already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So how do you guys know each other?
I was working for a consulting firm that was winding down called the Walkable and Livable Communities Institute, and I had some time, growing amounts of time, and I went to a Northwest Trail Alliance meeting, and this crazy guy gets up there and starts talking about this youth mountain bike racing league called NICA. Well, I had heard of NICA because a friend of mine is a coach for the Berkeley, Oakland area where they started the National Organization of National Interscholastic Cycling Association. So he'd been nagging me for years to start a league up in Oregon. And he's a pretty prominent coach within the organization. And an old writing buddy of mine from back then. And so it'd always been in the back of my mind, but I was just always too busy to take something like that on. And then this crazy guy named Ed comes into the Northwest Trail Alliance meeting, starts talking about it, and the light bulb went off like, this is the perfect timing for me. I'm going to do it. So I talked to Ed and got it started and went through the process of forming the league, but that's how he and I met.
Yeah.
Was at that meeting.
So you do that in Oregon?
I don't now. I'm only on the periphery now.
Okay.
So I got very lucky in that an opportunity with an organization called Trips for Kids came up right about a year into this process with NICA, and I took that opportunity, and I was now going to be way too busy to do NICA.
Okay.
But a coach from San Francisco and her, at the time, boyfriend who worked for the NICA main office were planning on moving up to Portland. So she was willing to take it on, and she did.
Oh,
And so
cool.
it was a perfect handoff
Yeah.
situation. So
Nice.
they got married, went on maternity leave for a few months. We used that as our transition time, and then she took on the league right before the first racing season got started. So it was a good transition.
Cool. And Ed, are you kind of involved in that still in Washington?
I've kind of taken out a little bit of a hiatus, but I mean, one of the things that I'm interested in is supporting Robert's cause with the Trips for Kids. Or I'm talking with a few people and maybe getting a chapter started up here because for his national, or even is it worldwide? or is it national?
We're North American at this point.
North
We've
American,
had chapters in other countries.
But it's underrepresented here in the Northwest,
Yeah.
and we should change that. So looking to maybe help him do that. I at some point would probably get involved in the youth mountain bike league again. I was involved with it for so many years, and as I
Yeah.
stepped back from my bike shop, I decided to focus on my kids a little bit, which are not so heavily involved in the cycling. So just kind of venturing off and doing some things that
Right.
pique their interest. Like my son is 17 and into classic cars, so we're actually doing a classic car restoration
Oh,
together.
geez.
So
okay.
whatever bonds us
Yeah.
together, and that's the
Yeah.
important thing, and the beautiful thing
Absolutely.
you see about that youth league is like the team has grown. The team that I helped start, and it's kind of grown up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And now some passionate dads have taken it over, and they're off and running with it. And they've grown it from it was 3 or 4 kids last year, and now they had 15, 16 kids again. So we've swelled anywhere from 3 kids up to 25. It just depends on the season, and
Yeah.
it's being it social. How many kids can each other kid recruit and so forth. But what is the most beautiful thing you see about it is the connection with the family. Now all of a sudden you're seeing that the father or the mother and daughter, or the mother and son, or whatever the combination is, has something that they can now find in common and something to bond them together. And now you can have outdoor experiences together. And that's really cool about the youth is we all want to go ride these trails. You can't get to most of these trails without somebody taking you there.
Yeah.
So that's where the parents come
Yeah.
in and play. And now all of a sudden you're finding you got family connections, and you're finding something that you have mutual interest in, and you grow up being a mountain bike family. It's
Yeah,
really neat. So
that is
I'm
neat.
watching these things unfold before your eyes, and you're like, wow, none of these guys were riding before their kids are, and now they're doing it together. So it's cultivating not only kids to ride, but also getting more adults. And
Boy.
the dads in their 40s that are kind of maybe were sitting around too much. Now all of a sudden they're getting out and getting active too.
That's
So it's-
really great.
It's just as good for the parents as it is
Yeah.
for the kids.
Good for everything.
Yeah.
Win, 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 win.
Exactly.
Good.
So yeah.
Well, let's go to a quick break, and then we'll double back and talk some more with Ed and Robert, and we'll have a quick safety video, and then we'll be back with Psychology Today.
Ride single file in the same direction as traffic. Obey traffic signs and signals. Signal your turns and look behind you before you turn. And always stay alert. So just think of your helmet as part of your gear. You don't see a soccer player without shin guards.
You don't see a basketball player without shoes.
So don't ride your bike without your helmet. It's part of the gear.
Ride safe, ride smart. It's time to start today.
About wearing helmets, and other sports have equipment and things, and as cyclists, I'm sure all of us here, I didn't ask these gentlemen, but I'm pretty confident that we all believe in wearing helmets when we're doing our cycling. So it's just a must. So I've got one sitting here on the table, and I want to mention that they wear out. They don't last forever. The sun beating down on them while you're having fun just kind of disintegrates all the stuff, and so by all means replace them. Maybe that's something to ask for. It's holiday time as we're doing this show. Maybe it's time to ask for one for a holiday gift. And certainly if you have a crash, it should be replaced. And if they don't fit properly, they should be replaced. And you don't have to spend a lot of money on them. More expensive is lighter, but you just whatever you can afford if they meet the criteria for safety. So think about helmets. So we'll get back to our discussion with Ed and Robert in just a moment. I want to encourage our viewers to be riding your bike. I know talking to these guys about mountain biking and things, which I don't mountain bike very much, but it's just really kind of gets you going thinking about that, especially as we approach winter and it's colder and wetter. But gosh, getting out on the bike really makes a person feel good, and it's good for your mental health and your physical health. Portland Bicycling Club, formerly Portland Wheelman Touring Club, has a bike ride every day of the year, even the holidays coming up. So there's something to be done, and certainly investigate other kinds of riding. Cyclocross is kind of winding down. Mountain bike racing, I know a lot of times is in the winter and February and January and stuff. So there's always room for beginners. They want you there. So it's a kind of sport that's very inclusive and encourages beginners and helps them learn the ropes. So if you are out riding on a road bike, I encourage you to use lights. Light up yourself and your bike so that you're visible in the gray and rainy weather, whether or not you're riding in the dark. But even when it's just kind of gloomy, it's a good idea to have lots of lighting on so that you're visible. So you don't have to just abide by the law, but maybe a little bit more than what the law dictates so that you're sure to be seen. So let's get back to our discussion with Ed and Robert, and we're going to talk more about this Trips for Kids. I'm looking at Robert's shirt because he's got the name of the organization on his shirt. We're going to talk about younger humans and cycling in general. So this organization called Trips for Kids, the vision is we envision a world where kids from all walks of life have the opportunity to know the joy of riding a bike and the freedom to explore the natural world on two wheels. So that's pretty much precisely what we talked about the first half of the show, is just that joy of riding a bike and exploring. And so tell us a little bit about this Trips for Kids and that vision, Robert, if you would, please.
Yeah, Trips for Kids was started by a woman named Marilyn Price back in the late 80s, who lives in Marin County, California, which has a 2,000-foot mountain. And she was riding this mountain almost daily, still does, and she's 79 years old and still rides this mountain every day. And there's sweeping views from the top of the mountain. Even on the way up, you can see the whole San Francisco Bay Area, the ocean, the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's a beautiful ride. She was volunteering for St. Vincent's food kitchen at the same time and realized these kids have not only not had that experience, they've never been out of their neighborhoods in their whole lives. So I'm going to do something about that. And she formed the first chapter of what became eventually a national program. I actually worked for Trips for Kids at the turn of the century, running the Marin program while she went national, because a lot of energy was coming to us when people learned about the program and thought, this is a good idea. We need to get kids out in nature, on bike rides, and earn-a-bike programs also, which I can talk about. And so it started picking up speed in all kinds of different places, including Canada. For a while, we had chapters in Israel and Sierra Leone, and we've got 2 potentially coming up in Mexico right now. But there have been, over 100 chapters over the years since the late 80s that have formed. And we currently have 44 active chapters, another 30 that are coming in emerging status or on hold or something like that around the U.S. and Canada.
So what are you doing precisely? Where are you working primarily? Is there something going on here in our area?
Yeah, so I'm a Portland resident. I'm the executive director of Trips for Kids, new national organization. It's just over 2 years old. So all these years, Trips for Kids has been a popcorn-style organization without a national umbrella. We realized we really need that national umbrella to improve program quality, come up with standards, and really help grow the movement. And so we started it up a couple years ago, and I'm working from a home office in Portland. The irony is we don't have a chapter in Portland. So Ed suckered me into the NICA League, and I'm trying to sucker him into the Trips for Kids chapter. So
Turnaround's fair play, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're working on that. And so there's a few opportunities here in the region. One of the challenges in the Portland region is there's not a lot of natural spaces for kids to go to and ride a bike. There's over 200 parks in Portland, and there's places like Forest Park, but there's only one place to ride in Forest Park, and that's on a fire road.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but not that exciting. And to get to it, you have to drive.
Right.
Especially if you're a little kid. You're not
Yes.
going up Germantown Road or another one of these dangerous roads to get up
Yeah.
there. So there's not that many opportunities. So Ed is involved in Washougal Park in his area, in the Camas-Washougal area. And then I've been involved with the advisory committee for Gateway Green,
Yeah.
which has got some good trails going, and we're working on improving space there. And then there's a place called Rocky Point out near Scappoose, which is a really old mountain biking area. But recently they logged, I don't know how many years ago, 3 to 5 or something years ago, and they're allowing mountain bikers to ride there. The Northwest Trail Alliance has an agreement with them to manage trails there, and there's been a lot of building going on. So it's a really cool space, and it's only 20 minutes from North Portland, so it's really close. So there's some opportunities, but we need more to get entry-level kids on bicycles in the
Yeah.
Portland region. So these are just a few places that are low-hanging fruit in a way. We're working to see if there's others, but these will be the 3 locations we start a chapter or a regional chapter program going for Trips of Kids. And what we do is we get kids who aren't bicyclists.
Right.
We're the low entry barrier type of
Yeah.
a program. We also focus on underserved or lower income kids in a lot of our chapters. I'd say a majority of our chapters focus on kids who don't have access. Their parents can't afford bikes, or they've just never figured out how to do it, or they live in an area that's too dangerous to ride. They need to get out to be able to experience bicycling. So our chapters will bring a fleet of bikes and a group of trained volunteers out to a trailhead or even a city park. We have programs in Chicago, New York City, and other places that do urban rides. So the kids are at least being in some green with trees and bushes and flowers and that kind of thing, even though they may not be in legitimate mountain bike trails. But we don't consider ourselves a mountain bike organization.
Yeah.
We are a group getting kids out into nature, discovering themselves, discovering nature, building self-esteem, learning about healthy activities, using the bike as the tool for that.
Boy, that's invaluable. I mean, just today I read that more and more kids and preteens are on YouTube. You know, just more and more screen time.
Sure.
And so this is, boy,
It's a big challenge, yeah.
yeah, a big challenge. Good, yeah. So it's not just you're focusing, talking about kids on bikes, but you also promote girls on bikes, people of color on bikes, lower income.
Right.
You've mentioned. How do you see? We just talked about YouTube, you know, being kind of a deterrent. How do you see bicycling being so beneficial to children? What do you see as the advantages? Why should we get on your wagon with you?
Gotcha. Well, you know, people over a certain age, when they were kids, they were running around free range in the afternoons after school and on the weekends, right? If you weren't back by 6 for dinner, you're in trouble. Nowadays, if you walk 50 feet away from the house, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because there's so much fear around being outside. So kids aren't naturally out running around and playing or riding bikes. Older generations all rode bikes at some point, a little BMX bike Ed talked about or whatever, just in the neighborhood, but less kids are doing that now.
Yeah.
We've seen physical activity drop. In safe routes to school, we've seen the numbers of kids walking and biking to school go from 98% in the late 60s to 15% now overall. And so what are the kids doing instead? They're watching video games and now YouTube and being less active. And the parents have fears around safety. And one of those fears is that the roads are fast and dangerous and the vehicles are larger and larger and people are distracted on their vehicles and you know the story.
Yeah.
So kids are less active. So the bicycle provides a kid an opportunity to get out and get somewhere and learn their neighborhood. So Ed mentioned, you know, walking is the slowest, most close to the earth activity, but you can only go so far walking without it eating up the clock.
Yeah.
The bicycle is the perfect neighborhood level space or citywide activity you can do and not have to be Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
You know, and be completely fit and go 50 miles, but you can get around town and through your neighborhoods on a bicycle. So for a kid, that's an amazing sense of empowerment and
I think so.
independence
And
and self-esteem
Yeah.
to be able to get out and explore your neighborhood. There's a study by a professor at Berkeley, and his son followed up and came up to Portland briefly and is back in UC Berkeley. Studied what people knew about their neighborhoods and had kids drawing their neighborhood. And so over the years, as kids draw their neighborhoods, it's become more disjunct. So back in the 60s, for instance, kids would draw a neighborhood and understand where the school was in relation to the store, in relation to the church or the park or whatever. Nowadays, it's all lines because they sit in the back of a car and they put their heads down and they wait and then they appear somewhere, right? And we're all doing that on Google Maps now.
Yeah,
We don't even learn our streets
don't
anymore
know
because
either.
we're letting that do it for us. So it's, they don't understand their neighborhoods, but if they can be on a bike and even walking too, but walking and biking together, they can get to their entire neighborhood and learn where they are and be part of their community and their neighborhood. So
Yeah.
for me, that's the bottom line.
So, and did you find that to be true as you were in the bike shop, that kids weren't riding as much, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I've discovered, a little bit through my kids and some of these other kids that we would go take out, is the social element as well. The devices, your YouTubes and your video games and everything like that, unintentionally create isolation. So they're not working, or they're not interacting with their peers as much as well. And so, like with my daughter, she's very social, and so like my easiest way to get my daughter out on a bike ride is we're connecting with some friends. And so, like the Trips for Kids offers that, and these kids get introduced to all other kids, whether they're from their demographic or not. They get the chance to interact with all these other kids, and we blend things. When I do a ride, I make sure that there's a playground between the start and the finish of the ride, because especially the younger kids, definitely like grades, elementary school level, they want to mix it up. They lose their focus on maybe just say doing one thing. So
Yeah.
if you can allow them to just go to a playground and then get back on the bike and then maybe go get the ice cream at the end.
Yeah.
You create these levels of layers of interaction, and they have a really good time. So, but yeah, it's a matter of giving them the opportunities to do this stuff. And like Robert said, a lot of these kids don't have that opportunity, and so his program gives a conduit for them to discover these things. And then hopefully they grow up wanting and needing the same things that we do, and why we look to, or are willing to avoid the football game on Sunday, because it's a great day to go ride.
Yeah.
And go out and do the things that are really most important and are going to give us mental and physical health over, say, staying and watching the football game or staying on our video game at home. So.
And certainly something you can age into.
Right.
And like you said earlier, this woman that started all this is in her 70s, and we have lots of older riders in the Portland Bicycling Club that are in their 70s and even 80s with the help of an e-bike, still riding.
Yeah.
But, out there socializing, doing the exact same thing you're talking about for the 9-year-old.
And exactly. The 7-year-old and the 9-year-old. Common theme. Sociability, right? They like the club. The kids want to be part of the club as well.
Yeah.
So,
And where's the bakery stop?
Yeah.
So, how do you find your market to get them involved in these organizations?
Our chapters are all different sizes and scales, but the majority of them will find local agencies like Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, churches, schools, community centers, parks and rec departments, bike clubs, and they'll get the kids through those channels. So, Boys and Girls Club is a perfect example. Kids are already coming there, and they're always looking for activities for them to do, and they've got lots of stuff inside the building and maybe a basketball court, but getting them out and on a local trail or something like that, it's always an induced incentive for them. And so when we bring the program to them and make it easy for them, they are always very happy to have the kids go on a ride. And so we'll connect up with them, we'll pick a time to ride, and they'll bring the kids out, or we'll bring a van and pick kids up. It depends. Each chapter is different depending on local resources.
And what's around that you can utilize
Exactly.
for
How
the
close are
riding
things,
itself.
right?
So what about safety? How do you promote safety with the kiddos? Like say you are at a Boys and Girls Club, just getting started, what kinds of things are at issue?
Well, parental worries are number one. So we have to make sure that the organization sends enough information through the Boys and Girls Clubs to the parents so they understand that safety is paramount for us. We have trained volunteers. All kids are provided with helmets and bikes that we provide. So we know the bikes are safe because we have professional level mechanics working on them. We have arrangements with local bike shops and other folks that can get the bikes up to snuff. the first 45 minutes to an hour of each ride is a group safety training session with the kids. So we'll have them ride to make sure they can actually ride. They might say they can, but they might
Yeah.
show up and actually don't. They just wanted an excuse to get out of school or whatever. So we do a little training with that, and some kids we have to pull off to the side and teach them how to ride while the group goes and rides. So that can happen sometimes. But we do little things around cones to learn balance. We talk about helmet safety and that kind of thing. With Safe Routes to School and road-based
Yeah.
programs, it's about interacting with cars too. So we have to teach them rules of the road and certain safety aspects. Trips for Kids chapter, some of them also do that type of programming as well. They'll work with the school, they'll get on the school playground, set up a little small street scale system and teach kids how to negotiate stop signs and intersections and what to do when you're crossing driveways and about the right hook and those kinds of things are the most dangerous for kids. Helmets and helmet fitting, how to be seated properly so you have good balance, how to put your foot down, how to deal with other kids. And one of the challenges with kids in a group is they're like little ducklings. Whatever the first kid is doing, the rest will just follow blindly. So the trick is getting them to actually stop at the stop sign and think for themselves and not follow the group think. It's a really interesting aspect of human nature, right? We
I
in a
have to
group,
warn
we follow the
adult
leader.
riders to
Yeah,
do that
exactly.
too. Don't just follow them.
Yeah, it seems like they know what they're doing. I'll follow that
Yes.
person. Yeah.
It might be safe for them, but it might not be for you. It's a universal problem.
And we'll
So-
teach kids ABC check too on their bikes, so air brakes
okay.
and chain and that kind of thing too, to make sure their bikes are in a minimal state before they leave.
So do you ever go into the actual repair of bikes?
Yeah, so Trips for Kids does specifically, it's one of our programs. And so, as I said, you know, a majority of our kids are underserved or lower income
Yeah.
kids. So a bike is an issue. It costs some money. It's not a car, but it still costs money. If your parents are poor, you can't afford to spend hundreds of dollars on a machine. So our Earn a Bike programs are programs in cities where we'll set up a shop somewhere. It could be a garage or it could be somebody's bike shop, mechanic station after hours, whatever works. A community center room, I've led programs out of before. We bring in enough tools and supplies to get it going, and you ask the community for donations. So a side benefit is you're taking bikes out of the waste stream. You bring them to the shop, you cannibalize them, and turn them into workable bikes. And the kids learn STEM lessons, and we teach about the physics of a bicycle, because it's a great STEM tool, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's all this physics going on with a bicycle. So we teach the kids that. Our programs run from latchkey style, where the kids can come and go at will and they accumulate points or whatever to get their bike, or classroom style, where there's Tuesday at 3, you attend for learning about this part of it, Thursday at 3, you learn this part, and then after a certain number of lessons, they earn a bicycle they can take home.
Nice. So what kinds of partners do you have then to make this happen?
Bike shops, bike clubs, police departments. You know, they have bikes they'll hold for 90 days and nobody
Yeah.
claims it. The chapter will go and have a relationship with them and get bikes. And some of the bikes are something that the chapter might sell to make revenue, but most of the bikes are bikes that the kids will take and repair and use them. And sometimes the kids will work on bikes that will be given to homeless programs or to their parents or to a church group that's going out, or a bike giveaway group, or you know, all kinds of combinations. Metal recyclers will come in on a monthly basis and pick up the stuff
get
that's too rusty
get
to.
the real junk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So you talked about, you're really into youth riding, and certainly the woman that started this whole organization. What really got you motivated to do this? What really tugged at your heartstrings and to make it a career? That's kind of a big thing. What were
Probably
the deciding factors?
Two things, I think. One was my own experience as a kid trying to be a bicyclist and realizing all the barriers there were to bicycling, right, for people that need to be overcome. And traffic is one of them, and you know, and that kind of thing. But two, at one point I was managing group homes for
Okay.
abused, neglected teenagers, right? So these are kids that have no resources. They've pulled out of their houses, and now they're just stuck in a home with strangers and trying to figure it out. And they don't have a car, they don't have anybody to drive them except in the group situation, but they're old enough to be doing things in the afternoon and going out and meeting other people and doing teenage activities. And so I realized, wow, these kids need opportunities to get to the local park and that kind of thing. A bicycle is the perfect tool for them. Let's do this. So I was working with an agency which had over a dozen homes around the San Francisco Bay Area, each with 6 kids in them. and we started talking about how to get the kids active. And bus passes would be one way to do it. The group has a van, they can go on group trips, but then the kids can skateboard, bike, scooter, whatever. Let's make that happen for them. So it really clicked for me that this needs to happen more systemically. And then the more I did that, I realized the infrastructure is poor too, and distance is a factor because we're sprawling our communities out so much that it's too far to ride. So policy is now an issue. So I started working in the policy realm, and that's what started the Safe Routes to School movement, is we were realizing all this policy change had to happen if we want really big numbers of people to start walking and biking and using transit more. There's an amazing amount of work we need to do to reshape our communities to make it safer and more convenient to do that.
So do you find yourself still having to work in policy, or do you really have time to be involved in that?
It's a great question. So with Trips for Kids, I'm full-time doing this,
Yeah.
and I've got 2 kids, and I'm
Right.
just too busy to do that. We're a program organization, but with Safe Routes to School, we were a policy organization, and there were Safe Routes to School programs doing the thing. I'm running a new program at my youngest son's middle school with Safe Routes to School, so I'm working with the principal and school resource officer and teachers there to improve things around the neighborhood for that school. But it's important. So Trips to Kids eventually will get into the policy realm, but we need to make sure we're growing to the level we want to at this point, and get areas like Portland and Seattle where we don't have a presence yet going. But those chapters then end up getting involved in local policy issues, right? Because they run into the same challenges. They want their kids to be able to ride to this park from this community center, and they realize there's a bad crossing, or there's no good way to do it, or that kind of thing. And so they start ending up getting involved in policy.
So one thing kind of leads to another,
Right.
because you're utilizing, and you find those little glitches in the infrastructure that are inevitable when you're building it after the fact. I mean, I always say if we had started with bikes and pedestrians in mind in the first place, it would be a totally different place. So we've been talking about the parents getting more involved with riding with their children and things. How, if you ride with your children and you ride with your 9-year-old, how do you make it challenging and interesting for you? Certainly hanging out with children is a good thing, and that alone is worth it. But trying to make it a little bit of a workout or a little bit of fun for you too for the bike ride, how do you get the best of both?
Well, sometimes you gotta. You really honestly gotta, sacrifice some of your, your own needs to get them out. Obviously, support. When we'll have rules. I'll just use in NICA we have a 4 or 6 to 1 rule where you need 4 or you need 1 adult or per 4 children or 6 children or 3 children, depending on the level of riders that you have. So if you want to be able to get a little bit more of your own bike riding needs taken care of out of that ride, then you're going to need to recruit more parents, more people to be involved. Now, when we're talking about younger kids, any group ride you do, you're going to have all the parents involved anyway. But really, you're sacrificing to spend the time with them, and it really depends on the age level. As like my 9-year-old, honestly, if she's up for it, she can actually give me a little workout if she wants to. It just depends on what they want to do. So, can you set a goal that can give you a little workout yourself? Hey, if we get down to the lake, which is 5 miles away. Here's what we're getting for dinner, So, those kind of things. I've never really kind of worried about what was in it for me. The satisfaction of getting the kids out there and making sure they have a good time is plenty for me. So I would say kind of set your own needs as far as, what challenges are you going to personally get out of that ride? Just put that aside and focus on the kids. If you get at that level where you're doing NICA and youth mountain biking racing, then you're going to get challenged by the kids that are the strongest within these clubs anyways. Some of these kids can ride circles around you as they get the natural abilities, as they have the natural abilities, or as they develop as riders as you move along. So, but I think at the level of the Trip for Kids, you know, it's really looking at, I think, and Robert could attest to it better than me, but I think, you know, making sure that you're truly in it for the right reason, and that's to make sure that the kids get the experience they need out of it, not you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, just as far as getting parents out and working with their kids on riding and that kind of thing. So, you know, a lot of people go too far when they start. And so they go on too long of a ride, too difficult of a ride. They try to show off what they've got. But if you're doing a ride with somebody who's a beginner, you need to think about what the beginner's needs are and what's going to make them happy. And so if you're a, you know, Cat 1 road racer, they're going to assume you're too fast to ride with. I have a lot of my friends who know I'm a bike nut who won't ride with me because they assume I used to be a Cat 1 road racer and now I'm a downhill mountain bike guy. And they think, oh, he's going to get out there and just slaughter me. No, not at all.
He's pretty slow now. You're safe.
Exactly,
Go ride with him now.
He knows I'm pretty slow now. So.
That's why I'm willing to go.
But, you know, for younger kids, toddler age and stuff, you know, I always tell parents, convert a trip you're already doing in the neighborhood to a bike trip. Really short, really easy. No Lycra. Street clothes, throw on a helmet, grab whatever bike is available. It doesn't have to be a fancy bike to go 8 blocks or even 8 miles if you just take it easy. And so just start small. Go to the local 7-Eleven 4 blocks away on a cruiser bike with your kid in a little seat and have, or a trailer, and just have some fun and dork around as a starting point. Our kids were on bikes at 3 to 6 months. And, you know, we put them in a car seat and a trailer with a towel around their head, lock them down, and go on. And then they went to the handlebar seat. And so they understood cycling from day one and are great riders as a result. But we started small. And so, you know, people want to invest a lot and buy a fancy bike right off the bat. Like Ed said earlier, you don't know what you're going to want to do. So don't buy something you don't know about yet. Get started, find out what people are into. The younger kids like to have adventures, so they're going to want to go to the ice cream parlor or the park and go on a swing and make it fun and do that and get people involved in that way. By the time they're middle and high school, they're very social. So it's about their peers. And that's why Trips of Kids is successful, because it's groups of peers out there. It's not the adults selling this activity. It's the fact that they're with a group of peers all having fun together being kids. That's the selling point. The adults are just the annoying people keeping them, making them wear helmets and be safe and slow down and, you know, all that stuff.
Buzzkill.
Yeah.
Well, guys, you've done a great job talking about just children and trying to get youth involved in cycling and away from the screens and stuff. Boy, it seems like a real challenge right now in our society. So thank you for both of you for all that you're doing and the ideas that you have and the energy that you're expending. And I hope that we see more of you and things going on. It's important. So thank you for joining us on Psychology Today, our viewers. And again, thank you to Robert and Ed for joining us and talking about their passion about cycling and kids riding. We all think it's really important. I think Portland Bicycling Club has, in the summer, some road bike rides for kids, and just a few during the summer. Kind of different probably, but just, short. They're adult rides, but kind of condensed for the kids. So a few miles long. So something to look into, that there are resources available for parents to help their kids get out on the road, and different programs too to help get a bike and get a helmet so that they're safe. So if you're out riding, encourage you to look into Portland Bicycling Club. It's used to be Portland Wheelman Touring Club. There's a bicycle ride every day of the year and even this time of year. So riding with a group will help you develop skills and find new routes and make new friends. Thanks for joining us.